Hey Healing Family, today I want to do something a little bit different. We're going to do a video talking about the importance of reconditioning and building up strength and endurance as part of the brain retraining and limbic system healing protocols that we're using. So for the purposes of the video, I am going to refer a lot to POTS specifically, but this can really be for any recovery from any chronic pain or health condition that may have led to some deconditioning. So the focus of today is we're going to talk about what happens to our bodies over time when we maybe have been bedbound or not doing a lot of activities because of pain or illness. So, an example where we actually have a real protocol that we follow for reconditioning in the chronic illness community would be with POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardic syndrome. I actually struggle from POTS because of my Lyme diagnosis, because it can start to affect the autonomic nervous system in that way. And so part of what was really helpful on different parts of my healing journey has been, in addition to the brain retraining, to work on the limbic system piece, to then also understand the deconditioning that has occurred in my body because of my different symptoms, because of the times where I've had pain flare-ups, or because of the times that due to POTS I was not able to do a lot of activities. Through brain retraining, I will say I don't have as many triggers for POTS symptoms as I used to have, or for chronic fatigue symptoms, or for Lyme symptoms as I used to have. However, there are times like in the really extreme heat like we've been having that I'll get a huge flare-up. Or for example, when I was pretty much in bed for a whole year because I broke my leg, I noticed a huge flare up in a lot of old pain pathways and things like that coming about. And it wasn't until I took some time to think about it that I realized the times in my life that I felt the best, despite having these diagnoses, not just related to brain retraining, but also related to the times where I was really scaling and leveling up my activity level and regaining strength and regaining conditioning. So let's take a moment to just think about a couple things. Anytime we're anywhere on this brain retraining journey, we want to make sure we are working with doctors or providers that were cleared for physical activity. We want to start slow and we want to go gently with activities that aren't super triggering. So we are going to almost create a hierarchy of the activities we want to get back into, and then slowly titrate our way to more tolerance of those things, and then slowly increase the intensity and duration so that we can build that strength and endurance over time. You want to really listen to your body. You want to pay really close attention to your body's signals. If anything feels like it's an actual flare up, take a pause. Maybe do some of those brain retraining rounds in your head of, it's okay, nervous system and amygdala, calm down. There is not a threat happening. We are just trying something new today. You are safe. You are loved. You are healing. Give yourself some time to see if we calm down the limbic system with the self-talk, the deep breathing. Are we then able to go back into the activity, or do we need to listen to our body that it's time for rest? We want to really prioritize on activities that are fun and important and exciting for you, because we want to use our energy wisely. We want to pick activities that have that added bonus of being really motivating for us so that we want to engage in them more. And we want to utilize pacing. So we want to break these tasks into manageable segments with resting intervals in between, so we're not overexerting. So some of those brain retraining hacks that we might want to use in addition to our reconditioning would be deep breathing. So practicing just slow, deep breaths, calming our nervous system, reducing our anxiety, helping to regulate heart rate. That's stuff that we're going to want to work into part of this reconditioning experience. We want to work on mindfulness, staying in the moment, not worrying about the outcomes, but staying present. We're going to work on visualization. So if we can visualize and imagine ourselves engaging in those activities without symptoms and with feeling good, we're mentally rehearsing what that's going to look like when we get to that point. We might want to just start there. If we're brand new into this process, just the deep breathing and the visualization and the positive affirmations to boost our confidence. And then over time, even if, say you've been really working on your reconditioning for months and months, and you've been moving your way up to walking, and you're like, well, this weekend I want to go with my friend and do this hiking trail, we can still utilize visualization. We can still utilize this idea of, I don't quite know if I'm up for it, but I'm going to try. Okay, let's do these positive affirmations. Let's visualize doing it as if we're actually doing it, to signal to the amygdala that it is safe, to create that new neural pathway that we can succeed. So I'm so excited to share some of these ideas that I've had and stuff that's worked for me. So it is possible to regain control of your life, but we might have to do it in different ways than we're used to. So throughout this video, I thought it would be helpful to share my personal experience because then it just makes more sense. But we can apply this to so many unique individual issues that you might be working with. So, back in the day, I was really active. I was, running half marathons. I was a personal trainer. I was doing powerlifting. I was teaching yoga 4 or 5 days a week. I was teaching dance classes and really active and hiking. And so it took a lot. It was a big transition for me dealing with Lyme, with Epstein-Barr, with chronic fatigue syndrome, with POTS, with chronic pain when I had my really bad back injury. That all of that lingered, and it took a big portion of my identity and shifted that. And so part of the brain retraining has been not just this idea of, oh yeah, we're going to get right back to how we were, because that's not possible, and I always say we don't want to have this almost toxic positivity around healing, but we want to retrain our brain about how do we define ourselves, what is important to us, what is our values, what are we looking forward to. And maybe things look a little bit different, but if my core value is I just like being outside and being physically active, then that can look different than it used to look, right? So I can go out and go on maybe a gentle bike ride, or, on the times where I've really been in a good enough space over a couple years of doing this work, I was running small road races again, but it was very slow. It was walk, run. It was taking breaks. It was dealing with other side effects. But for me, the important thing was I like being able to actually say that I can still do this or that I can do it a little bit differently. So one of the things that I have used as a tool when I have these ups and downs is mobility aids. And it took me a while to be okay with this, but I think that we don't need to have a stigma around invisible illness, invisible disability, and mobility aids. So I have some footage I'm going to show about using a rollator, a walker, and it was kind of hard for me to come to terms with using this because I would go to my physical therapist and say, but I don't want to lose the strength I have. I don't want to rely on this. And one of the most interesting things that I've heard from physical therapists about this concern is, for example, I was planning a trip to like the zoo or to Disney, and I'm like, well, I don't know if I want to use this. Like it's hard for me to admit that I might need this for the pain issues or for the feeling dizziness from the POTS. And they're like, well, what are you going to do if you don't use it? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I either won't go or I'll go and I'll be in pain and I'll have to continually look for a bench to sit down and we'll probably go home early that day. I won't stay the whole day. And they're like, exactly. But if you do use it, what's going to happen? And I'm like, well, yeah, I'll be using a walker, but I'll be able to sit when I need it, take breaks, stay the whole day, get more steps in, even though I'm using assistance. So really, you're actually building your endurance and building your confidence and your potential to heal more using a mobility aid than if you are stubborn and kind of want to resist using it. The other kind of interesting positive for me with using this mobility aid is my daughter also has Lyme, and one of her symptoms is joint pain at times. And so when I'm not using it, she's like, can I have a ride? And I'm pushing her in it. So even like looking for those small things that maybe you don't think about as being a positive when you're making these changes, but it's a help. So we want to start small, and when we're using these mobility aids, we want to kind of figure out where our body is, gently increase our intensity, maybe using a journal or something to track our progress. And this doesn't have to be a walker. It can be a cane or a wheelchair or a scooter, or even this idea of like, having someone assist you when you're walking. It doesn't have to be an actual mobility aid, but just this idea of like using benches along the way. Don't get mad at yourself if you have to stop and sit down. And also knowing this is something that you can rely on in a flare, but you don't have to use it all the time. And if you're in a flare, prioritize some self-care and rest, but also know when you might need the assistance. The other thing I wanted to talk about is kind of a double-sided coin here. So this is the prevalence of monitoring things. So Apple Watches and Garmin's and all of these things. So we know with POTS, obviously it is important with a lot of different health conditions to track certain things like blood sugars and heart rate and blood pressure. And sometimes you have a doctor that's like, no, in this instance, if you're trying a new activity, you should be monitoring something to make sure you're in a safe zone. We also know, though, from brain retraining that over obsessing and over scrutinizing and obsession with a constant check-in on your Apple Watch or your monitor is not good, because the way that the amygdala triggers the stress response and our nervous system goes into a stress response, I could be having a normal increase in my heart rate, right? If I, for POTS, for example, I could be wearing an Apple Watch, and maybe I get up and I have to run into the kitchen for something and I get a little dizzy and my heart rate goes up. And then if I'm not tracking or anything, I kind of get distracted and I go over here, my heart rate kind of regulates and I'm not having a big symptom. There is a part of brain retraining, I think we all might have noticed this if we've struggled with this issue. If I get an alert on an iWatch or an Apple Watch saying, hey, your heart rate's high, you better go sit down, and then I start to get in my head and I get nervous. And then that nervousness triggers my heart rate to go up more. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm having a really bad flare. And then I become obsessive with it. It can be counterproductive, right? So you know for yourself if this is something that is a helpful tool that you are using to prevent a really bad flare, or if you're far enough along in your recovery that it's becoming a hindrance and you're obsessing over it, and on the days you forget to put it on, do you feel better? And again, that I'm not saying that's true for every case, but if your doctor has said to you, you don't need to be tracking it, that's not going to make a difference for your recovery. It's better to kind of take a break from it. But we want to be mindful about it, and if it's something we need to use, we can totally use it. But let's pair it with some of our brain retraining techniques. Let's program our brain to say, this is something I'm using to stay safe, and I'm using this to identify where's my window of tolerance for these activities, but I don't have to obsess about it. And a big number doesn't really mean anything. That is a snapshot in time of what my body's doing. I am still safe. Just as fast as it went up, it can come back down, it can regulate, and let's use it for a tool. Another really great idea, if you have access to it, would be pull-based exercises. So half of the way that I was able to recover from having a broken leg, which really flared up some of my symptoms that had been gone for a while, is I was doing pull workouts. I was doing jogging in the pool. I was doing leg lifts in the pool. I was floating in the pool, practicing swimming, getting that endurance. There's a lot of good benefits to this. So it offers temperature regulation. So if it's, it's going to help us prevent overheating, that's also helpful if you have MS. Or with POTS, we want to stay that our temperature is regulated. We have that feeling of weightlessness. So if we have chronic pain or acute pain, that feeling of weightlessness, that buoyancy from the water, low impact on our joints, the movement feels easier, it's going to feel a lot better, so we're more motivated to keep going. And there's gentle resistance, so it does help. There's not a lot of strain on our body, but we are getting some resistance, maybe some strength building through doing these exercises. And then I specifically wanted to touch on bed-based exercises. There is bed-based yoga and chair-based yoga. If you are brand new in this process and you are working your way from being bedbound, there is the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia Levine POTS protocol, which I was talking to my physical therapist, and you can use that POTS protocol for reconditioning from other issues too. Even Pilates was actually developed to help people who were injured from the war when they were in their bed and they had that structure around their bed. It was how do we use the muscles to regain some strength and endurance, but in bed. So you can find ways to do supine yoga, completely floor-based or chair-based or bed-based practices to regain strength while you're safe and you're in bed, depending on your symptoms, and then we're going to work our way up. So maybe we start with something like that Levine protocol or bedbound yoga, maybe a little bit of Pilates, and then we might just do some leg lifts and some arm raises. And over time, maybe that progresses to sitting up and doing those exercises in bed or in a chair. And then maybe that progresses to standing and using something to hold on to. You have to find what's going to work best for you and just be patient. Another thing I wanted to touch on, especially because I know since I'm talking about POTS, a lot of people are going to chime in about the importance of hydration and salt. So obviously sodium and salt, you have to really ask your doctor. This isn't something that's going to help everyone in the reconditioning, but especially with POTS, there's issues with electrolyte balance and sodium helping to regulate that heart rate. So I did want to talk about No sponsorships or anything like that. I don't even know what company specifically this is, but I was learning from a naturopath about Celtic salt. So this is also called gray salt. And it's a type of sea salt that's harvested in the coast in like France and the Celtic region. And it has a really unique, like extra mineral composition. So it helps with heart health exclusively. And so a lot of people with POTS have been talking about this a lot. And I was excited to try it. And, I think it's really interesting. So it's harvested from naturally occurring salt ponds, so it has a really high mineral content. And those are minerals like magnesium and potassium and calcium, which are all good for the heart. Obviously, clear this with your doctor. Some people are cleared and their doctors are like, please have more salt, that's going to help. If you have other issues associated with the heart or high blood pressure, you may need to avoid some sodium intake. So just double check. But if you are someone who's being advised to try this, it's going to help with heart function and muscle contractions and fluid balance and electrolyte balance. So electrolytes help with our nerve impulses, and they regulate our heart rhythm and our autonomic nervous system. So this is really helpful if we're trying to avoid drastic highs and lows in our heart rate when we're reconditioning. Another thing we want to think about is Celtic salt's minimally processed. It's natural. It has natural color and texture. It's not going through a refinery process with additives and whitening and anti-caking agents. It has a different flavor, so it's just something interesting to think about if you're adding that. Along the herbalism line, again, always check with your doctor, but hawthorn berry is very regularly recommended by herbalists to help with cardiovascular health. So it isn't something like I would say to go out and just jump on the bandwagon and take it, especially if you're on other medications. But if you're looking for that more holistic support when you're working on reconditioning, hawthorn would be something to ask an herbalist or a naturopath about. It's known to help with vasodilation, to widen the blood vessels when needed, which can help with blood pressure. It helps with heart rate regulation. It's full of antioxidants and flavonoids to help with free radicals. But again, this is very individualized. Make sure you're talking to a doctor about it. I just thought it was an interesting thing to think about, along with just eating healthy foods. So when we think about reconditioning, we want to make ourselves feel as prepared as possible and as good as possible. So anything we can do to set the stage to feel good in our bodies and good about ourselves and have good, clean energy in our systems is going to help. Let's talk for a minute about some neuro-linguistic programming and cognitive behavior exercises, brain retraining exercises that we can use in this process. So number one, we want to set positive intentions. So we want to prime our brain for success and shift our focus away from fear. So an example would be, as I begin to explore this new activity, I'm choosing to focus on my strengths and the progress that I've made so far. My intention is to engage in this activity with curiosity and an open mind, and I know that I can adapt, and I know that I'm getting stronger every day. We also want to think about relaxation techniques, so maybe before and after, practicing 2 to 3 minutes of relaxation to calm our nervous system. Deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, mindfulness, visualizations. We may say something like, I'm taking a moment to breathe deeply. I'm allowing my body to relax. With each breath, I release any tension. I create a sense of calm and safety within myself, and I am in control of my own experiences. We already talked a little bit about positive affirmations, but these also help to affirm and rewire our response to activities, and they shift us from seeing things as a trigger to having a more empowered mindset. So something like, I trust my body's signals, and I have the wisdom to recognize when I need to pause, but I'm also getting stronger. And each step that I take towards reconditioning, I'm doing this at my own pace, and I'm building those blocks to recovery. And then we look at gradual progression. We want to make sure that we're starting with manageable levels and slowly increasing. I am definitely one of those people who, the doctor clears me to say, yeah, I guess you could try to start running again. And I'm like, okay, cool, let's sign up for a race and I'll do 3 miles tomorrow. And then I crash and burn. Something common with POTS and with chronic fatigue syndrome is if you push too much too fast, you can get a crash. The mitochondria and the way that our energy produces is a little different. Again, we're not obsessing over it. It's about scaling. So we might want to say something like, I understand the importance of pacing myself. I'm going to start with a comfortable level. And I know that at any time I can gradually increase. I'm not limiting myself. I am protecting and nurturing myself. I am working on building every single day on my success so that I feel safe and I feel confident. And this approach is going to ensure my healing. And then we visualize that success. Let's imagine ourselves every day, the night before, right before we go out, engaging in that activity comfortably and safely. And maybe even saying, I visualize myself participating in this activity, feeling strong and capable and full of excitement and vitality. If I have a challenge, I'm going to handle it calmly and confidently. I know that I can adjust my pace. I know that I have support, and I'm going to continue with determination. And then self-compassion. We want to make sure we're always having an air of self-compassion and we're not beating ourselves up. We are boosting ourselves up. So be kind to yourself, celebrate small victories. Maybe thinking, I honor my process, I celebrate all my efforts. Whether I take a small step or a big leap, I know that I have so much courage and resilience, and I'm doing the best I can, and that is always enough. So I hope that some of these tips, I know some of them were more focused on POTS just because POTS is so comorbid with a lot of things now. We see POTS coming up as a byproduct of Lyme and EBV and CFS and Ehlers-Danlos and hypermobility, and the list goes on and on and on. But in general, the guidelines to working on reconditioning from POTS are very similar to reconditioning from any chronic health condition. So I was hoping that this would be a helpful tool. If you liked this kind of video where I show different tips and tricks, let me know in the comments below, like and subscribe so that you don't miss any of our videos, and give me any feedback that you think is helpful or anything else you want to see more of. I hope that with all of these tools and gradual progression, you can be kind to yourself, you can have a safe, supportive environment, and you can start this beautiful journey to get stronger and more capable, adapt, and learn. And I thank you guys so much for always showing up and supporting me, and I'll touch base soon. Bye.